Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm sure you're probably anxious to resume our reading and discussion of this book, The Global Vatican, by former U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Francis Rooney. It's an inside look at the Catholic Church, world politics, and the extraordinary relationship between the United States and the Holy See. Yes, the United States has an extraordinary relationship with the Holy See. You can get this book at Rowman and Littlefield and other major book outlets. I highly recommend the book. Now we'll proceed where we left off yesterday in Chapter 8 of this book, page 114 in the middle of the page if you're following along. I'll reread the last paragraph that we concluded with yesterday with some preparatory comments. First of all, this book, you've heard me reference this book as an admission, an out-and-out admission that the Vatican, the papacy, the so-called Holy See, is in control of American foreign and domestic policy. That's not just an assertion in this book. It is a boast of this book. And I want to remind the listeners, had I written this book, it would have no credibility. I would be labeled as an anti-Roman Catholic bigot, a Protestant assailant of the Church of Rome, and it would be dismissed as a whole bunch of Protestant rhetoric. Tom's got a grudge against the Roman Catholic Church. Maybe he was molested by a priest and he's just trying to grind his axe. Nothing of the sort. I didn't write this book. I had nothing to do with the writing of this book. This book was written by a devout Roman Catholic, a lifelong Roman Catholic, educated at Jesuit Georgetown University. Remember, they cultivate the cream of the intellectual crop in the United States and shuffle them off to highest levels, the highest offices in the land. Rooney's just one of a multitude. Jesuit trained at Georgetown University, elevated to foreign ambassador of the United States to the Holy See. He had direct contact with the papacy. He had direct contact with the American government. He represented the American government to the Holy See and carried messages from the Holy See back to our government. He was an official, open, overt representative of the United States. Full public relationship, ambassadorship with the United States. And he wrote a book about his experiences. He's well read in Roman Catholic history, obviously. He's well read in American history, obviously. He is well read in what led to the Protestant Reformation, although he never admits that the Protestant Reformation was literally fueled by the idea, by the fact, and the widespreading belief that the papacy is the Antichrist of the Bible. Without mentioning that, he's boasting that even during the colonial period of this country, when it was 99.9% Protestant, Maryland being the only Catholic colony, and it wasn't free to practice Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism was suppressed even in the Roman Catholic colony of Maryland. Since the colonial period, the Catholics in this country now control our government. And our government, because of Roman Catholic control, has now established full, open diplomatic relations with the Vatican. And the Vatican now heavily influences, if not controls, our foreign and domestic policy. It's not just an admission by this author. It's a boast. That's what this book constitutes. Now, I will begin reading the second full paragraph on page 114. Listen, do you doubt that Rome controls our foreign and domestic policy? As unlikely as that would seem to someone who knows nothing about this, as unlikely as it would seem that a foreign potentate of the Vatican, that 109-acre stretch of land surrounded by walls in the middle of the city of Rome, could possibly control foreign and domestic policy. It's just untenable, right? Well, it certainly would be if I made the suggestion, but here's the Roman Catholic former ambassador to the Holy See. Listen to what he says. In the essence of official diplomatic relations, Archbishop Francis Spellman of New York himself, an ardent and vocal anti-communist and Fordham man, that means he graduated from Fordham University, Jesuit trained, was America's primary liaison to the Vatican. Okay, he was the foreign ambassador, as it were. Archbishop Spellman. He was correct in believing he could achieve more for the church from his post in New York than he could have done in Rome. Remember, Rome tried to recruit him to come and teach one of the big universities there in Rome. Nothing doing. I'm staying right here in the United States. I'm running the Cold War. I'm running politics in Washington, D.C. I'm making America Catholic. We've got too much to lose if I leave this country and go to Rome. Okay? I might someday become Pope, but I want to achieve the objective of John Carroll from the colonial period. I want to bring his view of America into reality. I'm staying here in the United States. Okay? He says he was correct in believing he could achieve more for the church, that is the Roman Catholic Church. Don't confuse that with the body of Christ. They're arch enemies. He was correct in believing he could achieve more for the Roman Catholic Church from his post in New York than he could have done in Rome. And he became the face of the Catholic Church to most Americans. Okay? The very face of the Roman Catholic Church. When Spellman walked into the room, you saw Vatican City. He's the man. And it says, Spellman played an important behind-the-scenes role in virtually every major U.S. foreign policy decision of the time, particularly decisions regarding the containment of communism. Okay? Making America Catholic was couched under the veil of fighting communism. Okay? Remember, Rome always raises up a boogeyman and launches everyone to assail that boogeyman, while behind the scenes, Rome is accomplishing her counter-Reformation, the counter-Protestant Reformation agenda. During the Cold War, during the rise of communism, the threat of communism, the Roman Catholic Church taught everybody that communism was atheistic. It was anti-Christian. And so this proposed boogeyman in Russia and China and elsewhere became a direct threat to quote-unquote Christianity. And of course, as long as you believe that Roman Catholicism is Christianity, well then, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and also, the friend of my friend is my friend. Here's the deal. If you want to defeat Protestantism and get the Protestants to come back to the Roman Catholic Church, unite in a common effort with the Roman Catholic Church, then raise up an antichrist boogeyman in Russia. And it worked marvelously. Okay? Spellman was running this agenda. Remember, the Jesuits created communism and perfected it, installed it into Russia through Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin and the whole works, all Jesuit trained. There's your boogeyman. They're ready for an ecumenical movement in the United States and the world. And Rome is going to capitalize. She's created this situation. Now she's going to reap the benefits. Cardinal Spellman is a principal leader in this anti-communist sentiment that had swept over the United States during the Cold War, this ecumenical anti-communism. All right? Spellman was a member of the National Committee for a Free Europe, an organization an organization headed by CIA Director Allen Dulles. So here we have the CIA, which I call Catholics in Action, together with Spellman, running the anti-communist campaign in Europe, not just the United States. All right, this organization, National Committee for a Free Europe, headed up by the CIA, promoted anti-communist ideals, and he, being Spellman, lent his support to a broad array of American efforts to curb communism. So what were the American efforts that he headed? What I wish he had taken the time to give us what that broad array of American efforts were. But you can just let your imagination run wild. And I'm probably accused of letting my imagination run too wild with my anti-Catholic rhetoric. But this is in black and white in a book written by a Roman Catholic. He said they promoted anti-communist ideals, and Spellman lent his support to a broad array of American efforts to curb communism. He says in 1954, for example, the CIA, the Catholics in Action, approached Spellman to assist in its efforts to overthrow the left-leaning regime of Jacobo Arbenz of Guatemala. Okay, CIA's working clandestinely in Guatemala to overthrow the communist-leaning regime there in place, and they seek Spellman's help. The CIA recruiting Spellman. Why? Because Spellman's got more power than the CIA. Spellman's running the CIA. They're working together. Spellman was indispensable to the CIA. He says the agency asked him, that is, the CIA asked him to arrange, quote, a clandestine contact, unquote, for a CIA agent in Guatemala with Archbishop Mariano Rosselli Arellano, quote, so we could coordinate our parallel efforts there, unquote. Parallel efforts. The Roman Catholic Church's efforts, Cardinal Spellman's efforts, and the CIA's efforts. Parallel efforts. They're of the same mind. They're working for the same goal. It's couched in terms of anti-communism, but what it really is the imposition of more and more Roman Catholic control and influence, more and more Vatican influence in the United States and Guatemala. And you can just about imagine that the Vatican had, comparing this situation with every other situation that we've covered here, you can imagine that Rome instigated this left-leaning government in Guatemala to pose a left-leaning threat to the United States. Here we have communism growing up in our backyard. I mean, Guatemala is just like they used Cuba. Remember, Castro was a left-leaning, he was communist, and he was Catholic, openly Catholic. Now here, if you want to be a true American, in America, you want to be a true American, the best credentials to have to prove your patriotism is, number one, that you're Roman Catholic and that you are anti-communist. Okay? Back then, the days were to be a good American, you had to be Catholic and anti-communist. You certainly had to be anti-communist, but the best anti-communists were Catholics. So you had a double door ringer if you were Catholic and an anti-communist. And, of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis was an example to every Roman Catholic in the world. Here's what can happen to you if you're Roman Catholic and a communist. All right? The great boogeyman, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. What does that do to the ecumenical movement? Remember, Rome's planning the ecumenical movement. The Vatican Council II is going on during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's why so many Protestants participated in Vatican Council II. They have to unite all the Christians against this atheistic communist threat that the Vatican installed in Russia and in Cuba and in Guatemala. That's how you get the Protestants to join and get all lovey-dovey with Catholics and working for a Roman Catholic agenda. That's how you make Protestants more and more and more Catholic in their thinking. And if you team that up with futurism, which entirely exonerates the entire history of the papacy is no longer the Antichrist. Well, if he's fighting communism, he must be the representative of Jesus Christ on the earth. You see how it works? You see how we are manipulated? And it goes on today. It's even more vivid and in your face today. All right? Spellman, with the Catholics in Action at the CIA, that's what CIA stands for, Catholics in Action, they're going to overthrow the left-leaning leadership in Guatemala. He says the agency asked Spellman to arrange a clandestine contact. What clandestine contact? Well, secret contact. Well, how could Spellman arrange a secret contact? Look, Cardinal Spellman's running the shadow government in Guatemala. Cardinal Spellman knows intimately the politics and the people of Guatemala that run the country. Cardinal Spellman's probably privy to the idea that the Roman Catholic Church installed that left-leaning regime in Guatemala so that it could be overthrown, so that it could pose a real and potential threat to the United States. And more than that, Roman Catholicism, Christianity, see? So the Catholic in New York, Spellman, and the Catholics at the CIA need a clandestine contact in Guatemala with Archbishop Mariano Rosselli Arellano, quote, so we could coordinate our parallel efforts there, unquote. Soon afterward, the Guatemalan church released a pastoral letter denouncing communism. Oh, there's your secret contact. It was a priest down in Guatemala. Clandestine contact down in Guatemala. The Roman Catholic churches in Guatemala start putting out anti-communist rhetoric, and they're going to overthrow the government. It says this was read in the churches throughout Guatemala. Listen to this. Airdropped by CIA planes over the country. See, Rome's got control of our planes. Uses our planes to promote our propaganda. Same thing the CIA did in dropping leaflets over North Vietnam, encouraging the Roman Catholics of North Vietnam to flee to South Vietnam because Jesus and Mary had left the North and were now holed up in the South against the communist government of North Vietnam. Remember, we read that directly from Avril Manhattan's book, Vietnam, Why Did We Go? Oh, I highly recommend that book. I wish everybody would read that book. So they're just doing the same thing down in Guatemala. The CIA has lent its taxpayer-paid airplanes. We've printed up all the propaganda. We've loaded the airplanes with our tax money, and they're running down to Guatemala, flying around, dumping out all this litter to overthrow the government. And it's all to protect the Roman Catholic Church. Okay? Under the guise of defeating communism. I mean, if you told a Protestant we're doing this for the Roman Catholic Church, no Protestant would participate. But if you tell them we're doing this to fight communism, hey, where do I sign up? You need some money? Here, I'll borrow money to lend you money. See how gullible we are? Where's the protest? right down the futurist drain. That's where it went. Okay? We forgot who the Antichrist is. Can you imagine those who call themselves the body of Christ, true Christians, Protestants, actually work hand, fist, and glove with the Antichrist to help him govern the world and enslave us all? It's reality. It's not a pipe dream. It's not blind accusation. This author's admitting it. This Roman Catholic author is admitting it, boasting about it. He says, soon afterward, the Guatemalan church released a pastoral letter denouncing communism. This was read in the churches throughout Guatemala, airdropped by CIA planes over the country, and generally added to the impression that Jacob Arbenz had to go. Remember, he reigneth over the kings of the earth. The Pope seats the kings. He crowns the kings. And if the king runs out of disfavor with the Pope removes the king, removes the crown through the civil power of the United States of America. Protestant taxpayer-paid government of the United States. Your Protestant tax money goes to the IRS, that goes to the Federal Reserve Bank to cover your incalculable debt. More money is printed on debt, and that is used to fight these papal proxy wars. Oh, isn't it wonderful to be a Protestant? Or are you a Protestant? All right? Tough words, isn't it? I know sometimes I cringe when I say some of the things I say, but we can't soft pedal this. We have to accept the blame. How long can we be comfortable with our ignorance? How long can we be comfortable with our apostasy, our futurist apostasy? How long will we prevent ourselves from getting on our knees, getting on our faces, and confessing our sins and repenting before the Lord? Or are we happy to be slaves of Rome? Are we happy to be bond slaves of the Antichrist? Self-sacrificing warriors for the Pope? Wake up! It says, following the Guatemala episode, the Catholic Church would be involved in a number of similar efforts to keep unsavory characters out of power in Latin America. Latin America, all of Latin America. Some occurred during my tenure in Rome, says the author, and I will describe these in part 5 of this book. Even more recently, in the summer of 2009, following my ambassadorship, the church, that is the Roman Catholic Church, intervened when Honduran President Manuel Zelaya usurped his country's constitutional process to seek an additional term in office. After being dispatched from the country by the military, I guess you know who run the military, Zelaya ended up in Nicaragua, where the Sandinista regime of Daniel Ortega was glad to host him. Communism, the big Jesuit-created boogeyman, is taking over all of Central and South America, and we have to use the CIA, Cardinal Spellman, and the Roman Catholic Church, and whatever ecumenical evangelibelly will bend his billfold in half to pay for it, to fight this boogeyman and unite all the Christians in America. The ecumenical movement, Vatican Council II is ready. We have to have a common enemy. You see how it works? All the world's a stage, and the Vatican owns it. We'll be back right after this.
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings and to his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation under our Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Welcome back in the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. And if you wish to support Inquisition Update, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors the program. And if you'd like to contact me directly, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. I answer all emails that require an answer, and I write my emails personally. So if you want to contact the host, comments, suggestions, questions, criticisms, you name it, let's have it. All right. The United States government, under the direction of Cardinal Spellman, is helping to overthrow the Vatican-installed communist regimes. I mean, this author would cringe to hear me say this, but there's some things that even U.S. ambassadors to the Holy See aren't taught and told. Okay? They're on a need-to-know basis. Okay? So Zelaya ended up in Nicaragua, where the Sandinista regime of Daniel Ortega was glad to host him. On July 4th of 2009, Honduran Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga called publicly for Zelaya to abandon any attempt to return to Honduras, and along with more discreet actions, let me read it again, along with more discreet actions, you can read that, CIA, the Cardinal's strong words served to arouse the populace nurture several days of anti-Zelaya demonstrations and ultimately prevent his return. A victory for anti-communist America and Cardinal Spellman. Let's all us Christians get together and have a powwow, shall we? It's called Vatican Council II. We're going to bury the hatchet. All you separated brethren, you Protestants who no longer protest because you don't even believe the Pope's the Antichrist anymore, how about y'all come down to Vatican Council II and we'll sit and have cake and crumpets together, huh? Celebrate the victory over communism. Yeah, baby. Primrose path to perdition. Where do I sign up? You see how stupid we've been? You see how ignorant we have become? You see how totally indoctrinated and controlled and enslaved? Reality is much more believable. Now, what are we going to do? Maintain the status Vatican II quo? CIA operations continued, that is, Catholics in Action operations continued in Italy. Now we're back to Italy. Remember, they're fighting communism too. Right there in the shadow of the walls of the Vatican. Catholic in Action operations continued in Italy through the 50s with the cooperation of the Vatican. Who'd have thunk it, right? The young, devoutly Catholic CIA officer, the devoutly Catholic CIA officer, William Colby, you thought he was an American, but he's a Catholic, former agent of the OSS, the future director of the CIA, took over the Rome operations. How appropriate for a Roman Catholic CIA officer to take over the Rome operations against the communists in 1953. Arriving in the quote-unquote eternal city. I got news for you. The Bible doesn't call it the eternal city. It calls it smoke and ash, a great, giant, smoking hole in the ground when Christ returns. But for now, they call it the eternal city. Excited for, quote, an unparalleled opportunity to demonstrate that secret aid could help friends and frustrate our foes without the use of force and violence. That's right. If we get together with the Vatican, the CIA, the Protestant taxpayer paid and funded CIA, we can overthrow communism in Italy without firing a shot, with the help of the Vatican, of course. Sounds like a plan to me, right? As in 1948, the CIA was determined to keep the communists out of power in the election of 1958, no small challenge after leftist gains in June of 53, and with Moscow contributing as much as $50 million a year. That's right. Moscow, the poor Muscovites, the poor Russians, the Jesuit-controlled Russians are paying $50 million a year. The boogeyman's laid up $50 million a year to promote communism. Of course, it costs money, don't it? And it'll be answered by $500 million by the United States, the Protestant paying United States of America to fight the communist boogeyman, the Jesuit-controlled communist boogeyman in Italy. All the world's a stage. It says the CIA poured in its own funds, much of this funneled through the Vatican. That's right. Your tax money pays for the CIA, black operations, clandestine operations, and all that money's collected by the CIA, and it's funneled through the Vatican. That's right, through the Vatican. How about that, you protesters? Your money's funneled through the Vatican to fight papal proxy wars against communist boogeymen. You see the Federal Reserve debt just climbing exponentially as all this is taking place. And remember, the debtor is a bondslave to the creditor. And who's the creditor? The Federal Reserve Bank, run by the Rothschilds, who are hired by the Jesuits. It's a Jesuit bank. Your Protestant money goes to the IRS to cover the debt, the incalculable debt that the Jesuits have gotten you into through their wars. Their wars, not yours. Feeling a little bit enslaved now? Okay. CIA poured in its own funds. Much of this funneled through the Vatican. Eastern Europe. Now, this is a Catholic writing this, not me. A Protestant. No, this is Catholic admission. This is Catholic boast. They took your Protestant money, funneled it to the CIA, which funneled it to the Vatican. The boast of former U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, Francis Rooney, a Roman Catholic trained in Georgetown University. It's not just an admission, it's a boast. Okay? Eastern Europe was the specter that gave continuous urgency to the fight against communists. Life under Soviet-dominated dictatorships became only grimmer as the years wore on. Stalin's death in 1953 raised the hopes for reform behind the Iron Curtain, but these turned out to be false. No, they're not done with the boogeyman yet. The great boogeyman communism has much more to gain for the Roman Catholic Church, much more ecumenical result to gain for the Roman Catholic Church. In 1956, remember Stalin's dead now, 1956, following student demonstrations, yes, that's right, they used the kids in the universities to foment their agendas too. In 1956, following student demonstrations and the overthrow of the Hungarian government, the Soviet army invaded Hungary to crush the revolution and impose its own puppet regime, even more repressive than the preceding one. Okay? Communists are taking over the world. We need America more than ever before to defeat this antichrist communist regime. In Hungary, a Catholic country, devoutly Catholic. Starting to feel like a sucker now? I do. Don't even think that I'm trying to put myself above you. Not one whit. Everything I say is meant as much for me as it is for everyone else. It wasn't until 15 years ago God began to open my eyes and I rose above this. I've got nothing about which to boast. I've been just as deceived and used and enslaved and indoctrinated and dumbed down as everybody else. But not anymore. He says one glimmer of good news for freedom in 1956 was Cardinal Mindszenty and his escape from the imprisonment amidst Hungary's chaos. That's right. They got their man out of Hungary even during the chaos. And guess where he wound up? He says another man might have taken the opportunity to leave the country entirely, but not Mindszenty. He hurried to Budapest to assist the revolution. You want to be a good citizen, a good patriot, of Budapest? You have to be anti-communist. Join the revolution. The boogeyman's got to go. Now, as Soviet tanks rolled into the city in early November of 1956, he took asylum, guess where? In the American embassy, where he was welcomed on orders of Vatican-controlled Washington. I will add, Vatican-controlled Washington. And the cardinal would remain inside the embassy, a guest of the taxpayers of the U.S. government for the next 15 years. Yep. Put him up in the United States Embassy. We'll pay for him. Well, the Protestants will pay for him. They're so anxious to pay their taxes. God love those Protestants. They wouldn't withhold a dime from the beast. He says by the time he came out, Mindszenty, when he got out of prison, the world would be a very different place. Who made it a different place? The Vatican, with the help of the CIA and the American government, Washington, D.C. And who paid for it? You did. You who once called yourself a Protestant. That's the end of chapter 8. Here's chapter 9. It's entitled War and Pacem. Okay, Pacem is Italian, or rather Latin, for peace. War and Peace is the name of this chapter. It begins with a quote from John the 23rd, Antichrist Pope John the 23rd. It was written in April 11th, 1963. Listen to what the current Pope had to say at the time. Peace on earth, which man throughout the ages has so longed for and sought after, can never be established, never guaranteed, except by the diligent observance of the divinely established order. Unquote. You're not going to have any peace. No peace until you submit to the divinely inspired and established order. What is it? What is the divinely established order in the mind of Antichrist Pope John the 23rd? Global government under his authority, because he's the vicar of Christ, the replacement of the Son of God on earth. There's your new world order. And there's the carrot and the stick. You want peace? Then you cooperate with the new world order, my new world order. If not, there will be no peace. And what does our Bible say? There will be no peace until the Prince of Peace comes. And he's not the Pope. Okay? Christ is not the Pope. The Pope is not Christ's vicar. Quite the opposite. There you have it. John the 23rd's told you. There's the ultimatum. You want peace? You go along with the New World Order. You don't? There'll be nothing but war. And you're going to pay for it with your Federal Reserve notes, with your blood, and with your guts. And that's the way it's been ever since 1963. Now, beginning with the text, it says, it would take an entire book, and then some, to adequately address the changes in the lives of American Catholics in the 5 years between the death of Pope Pius XII in the autumn of 1958 and the death of President John Kennedy in the autumn of 1963. Okay? Now I want to speak about something here. Pope Pius XII was the last right-wing pope. They've been all left-leaning popes since then. Remember, up until the end of the pontificate of Pope Pius XII, the papacy was right-wing, anti-communist. The communism was the big boogeyman. It was a direct threat to the Roman Catholic Church. It had to go. Millions and millions and millions were slaughtered as a result of that. Now, the Vatican, after the pendulum has swung fully to the right during the Second World War and the pontificate of Pope Pius XII, now the pendulum of the grandfather clock has to swing violently to the left. You remember the description of the grandfather clock? The papal agenda, or the turning of the hands of the grandfather clock, always the same direction, depends upon the pendulum swinging both left and right. Left and right. If the pendulum stops moving and the world becomes at peace and happy with the status quo, the Vatican's agenda for a new world order stops advancing. The second hand on the clock, the minute hand and the hour hands on the clock stop advancing. Always in the same direction, they stop. So the Vatican has slung the pendulum as far to the right as possible up until the end of the pontificate of Pope Pius XII. Now it's time to advance the papal agenda, but only if the pendulum now swings violently to the left. Okay, I hope you didn't miss the broadcast where I made the analogy of the grandfather clock with the dynamic that keeps the second hands of the clock moving. All right. If you didn't, you have to go back in the archives and listen to it for the first time, or listen to it again. All right. It would take an entire book and then some to adequately address the changes in the lives of American Catholics in the 5 years between the death of Pope Pius VII, or rather the 12th in the autumn of 58, and the death of President John Kennedy in the autumn of 63. The themes that emerged from this period reshaped the Catholic Church and its role in the modern world, setting the stage for the future relations between the United States and the Holy See, and between the Holy See and the world. Okay? The pendulum's going to swing from the right to the left, but it's going to even more greatly increase the relationship between the United States and the Holy See. That's what he just told you. Okay? It says the new era began with the death of Pope Pius XII on October 9th, 1958. Within the wider church, the end of not just the American Roman Catholic Church, but the Roman Catholic Church worldwide, okay? Within the worldwide Roman Catholic Church, the end of Pope Pius XII's papacy was both mourned and welcomed. He had been Pope for 19 years and a dominant force. That's pretty much a controlling force, right? If it's a dominant force, it's a controlling force. He had been Pope for 19 years and a dominant force in the church for almost 40 years. The Italians have a saying, and I'll try to pronounce it in Latin. Un papa grasso ne seguiva uno magro, which translates as, quote, always follow a fat pope with a skinny pope, unquote. In other words, the church is ready for a change after a long papal reign. Change is exactly what it got in 1958. You ever suppose, maybe, little tongue-in-cheek here, do you suppose Jesuit-educated, Jesuit-influenced Barack Obama got his political theme of change from the Vatican? I mean, it worked for the Vatican. Just a thought. Anyway, John the 23rd was everything the austere, aristocratic Pope Pius was not. Born in a rural village in the northern Italy and third of 13 children. My, it was a very good Roman Catholic family, don't you know? 13 kids. Third of 13 children of a poor farmer, Angelo Roncalli was gregarious and seemingly unsophisticated despite his considerable erudition. He was also, at 77, already advanced in age. The consensus was that he would be a transitional pope, a congenial caretaker whom both the reformers and the conservatives in the church could accept at the time. Okay? Transitional pope. He's going to make a transition between the extreme right of Pope Pius XII and the Nazis against the communists, and then he's going to take a violent swing to the left for communism. I know you don't believe this, but listen, just keep on listening. First of all, I want to demonstrate the consensus was that Pope John the 23rd would be a transitional pope, and indeed he was, And he describes him as a congenial caretaker of both the reformers and the conservatives in the church. Now, you've heard me talk about the left and the right being the dynamic necessary to move the advancement of the hands on the clock. Well, that left-right dynamic isn't just confined to American politics, left and right. We're all aware of the left and the right. Okay. That same dynamic exists within the Roman Catholic Church itself. And this author has just confirmed it. There are liberals, left-leaning liberal Roman Catholics that want to reform the Roman Catholic Church, make it more amenable to the people. This is made direct reference to by the author. He says, describing Pope John the 23rd as a congenial caretaker of both the reformers, that is the left-leaners of the Roman Catholic Church, and the conservatives, that is the right-leaners in the church. Now, I've described briefly what the reformers were. What are the conservatives in the Roman Catholic Church? Those who want to return the Roman Catholic Church and its entirety, lock, stock, and barrel, back to the anti-Protestant Roman Catholic Church of the Council of Trent. Okay? The Pope is the power of the Church. The Church returns to the Latin Mass, where the people can't even understand the Mass. More and more and more involved in politics and war, and then I will include a description of those that I describe as the arch conservatives of the Roman Catholic Church. They want to return every tenet of the Roman Catholic Church back to the tenets of the Council of Trent and start burning heretics again. They're the dangerous ones, okay? You know, they want to describe us Protestants as radical fundamentalists. These people are, well, the inquisitors of the church, the inquisitors of the Roman Catholic Church. They want to start public annihilation of the heretics. And not only that, but the arch-conservatives of the Roman Catholic Church insist that the last true pope of the Roman Catholic Church was Pope Pius XII, the right-winger, okay? And every pope since then, John the 23rd, Pope Paul VI, Pope John Paul I, Pope John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and now Francis I, are all anti-popes, left-leaners, and God didn't put them on the throne. They are each and every one anti-popes, and that the chair of Peter in Rome, the great white throne in the yellow room at the Vatican, has been empty ever since Pope John the 23rd. And they now believe that the Roman Catholic Church has erred in its ecumenical movement to unite with the Protestants, and they wish to make reparations for their error and kill all the Protestants now to appease the wrath of Mary. How many of those do you suppose exist in the highest offices of the government of the United States? We'll continue on the program tomorrow. You've been listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. See you then.